So I actually started to record for 1.4b, but then I got interrupted. So now I'll be recording it correctly. So we want to show that this language, no extent of a is regular, where it's given as for every string in a, which is a language, regular language by the way. W is not the proper, so it's all W in A such that the W is not a proper prefix for any of the strings in A. So the way I'm going to do this is, I don't actually like what I'm doing, but I'll do it anyway. Okay, so you have some sort of initial state and then you have some final states, right? Now, what does it mean when we say that W is the proper prefix of something else? That just means that you reach an accept state with W, but then there would be a possibility that with some characters, it could be any character string, but with some string of characters, you could go to a different or the same, in fact, accept state, right? And if that happens, then W is necessarily the perfect prefix of some string, right? So our new language should only have such W's where this does not happen, right? So if with W you are ending at some state, it cannot be the accept state if from that state you can go to some other accept state, right? So you like did W and you ended up here. This should not be an accept state if your if this state is such that from here you can do something and jump to some accept state, right? So what we'll do is we'll find out all such states from which you can jump to some other state, and we'll cross out all of those. Like, I shouldn't say cross out, we'll not keep them as accept states anymore. So now this will give you a new machine, which is very much the old machine, except that the accept states, well, that almost rhymed, are now not the same. So I don't know, maybe these two are like not accept states anymore. And this one still is, because this does not lead you to any other accept states in M, right? So if this was M, let's call this M dash. So I claim that no extend A is the language of M dash, if A was the language of M. Alright, and I'm going to prove it like that. So first of all, notice that no extend of A is a subset of A, of course, because of this like very first thing, W is in A. So it's a subset in A in any case, and that is evident from the way I've constructed M dash, because in M dash it's basically M, except some of the accept states are not accept states anymore, they are just normal states. So any string that is accepted in M dash is also accepted in W, so it's also accepted in M. That's like obvious. What I want to say is, and also like any string that's accepted in M dash, it's of course accepted in W, I already said that. It's also not the proper prefix of any other string in A, because if it was, then you know we could just like, so you have some string and then W is the proper prefix of that. Well, maybe let's just call the remaining stuff as V. So then you would be able to apply V once you have reached the accept state, and then you would be able to reach some other accept state. But that's to say that with V you can go from one accept state to something else, right? But that's also saying with V you can go from one accept state of M to some other accept state of M. So the accept state that you start from before applying V, that will not be an accept state in M dash if this ever happens, because we already made M dash such that all of those states were not accept states anymore. So the second condition is also met. So the language of M dash, call that L, that's certainly an intersection of, that's certainly a subset of no extend, which I'll just call NE of A, which is just a subset of A. Now what I want to prove is that NE of A, like every element in that is actually like, you know, accepted by M dash. So for any element in NE of A, there are only like two properties that we'll rely on. First is that W is in A, which means it will necessarily have to end at one of the accept states of M, right? And W is not the proper prefix of any string in A. But because of the second property, what we basically have is that we cannot end up in this in any of these accept states which we have ironically rejected, right? So now these are not accept states anymore, but they were in M, right? And we know that we'll only be ending up in one of these nodes, but then some of these nodes are not good, but will never end up there because of the second property that every element in no extent of A has, that W is not a proper prefix of any string in A. So if you ever reached this node with W, well, it cannot be in no extent of A, because we know that from this node you can go to some other node which is also accept state of M. And thus we have proved that any of A, like all elements of that, are in L, like they are accepted by the machine M dash. So this is also like a subset of this, right? And that's to say that these are actually equal. And so that's it. Next question. Alright, so for languages A and B, the perfect shuffle of A and B is a language all W such that W equal to some string where the first string is in A. Oh, it's not a first. Oh, these are shuffled. Makes sense. Right. Each AIBI. Show that the class of regular languages is closed under a perfect shuffle. Okay. I get it. So we did that like concatenation stuff and all of that. Yeah. Yes, we should be doing something similar over here. Okay. So let's just think about it. You have two machines. The first machine recognizes A, the second machine recognizes B. Okay. You want to put the first character to the first machine, right? So you start off at, it's kind of weird though. Yeah, it certainly is weird actually. Okay, why are these questions getting harder and harder? Oof. Okay, so you're saying A1, AK, that is in A, and then D1 till BK is in B. What? Each AI, BI in sigma. What? Oof, this is very weird. Class of triangular language is closed under a perfect shuffle. The length of the strings must be the same and all of that. Think about it. We have to have some way of alternating between our inputs. It's like the first input should go to M1, the next input should go to M2, and then the third to M1, and so on. How do we do that? It's like, okay, what's going to happen if you just put A1, AK, so on? You have some initial state and then it like goes in M1, right? So now what I want to do is that every time it like tries to move forward, it somehow reaches a state of B. Yeah. Okay. Recognized character. Hey, wait a second. You don't need that kind of comp. Oh, you can make a simple switch. So we'll make another sort of machine which just alternates. Its only job is to alternate. So you got like A and B, just call them the nodes. That's it. These are, just for simplicity, call them small a and small b. These are our nodes. And okay, so this is machine 1, machine 2, and then this thing. These are the initial states, right? Let's just call them Q1, Q2, whatever. Right. And then this is A and B. Okay. So we'll be defining a new machine, right, where our capital Q is basically Q1 cross Q2 cross this set AB, right? Yeah. And by the way, both of these would be accept states, sort of. I shouldn't be even doing that, but like it's more of a mathematical thing of what we are doing, and we have done all of this before, but well, whatever. Our final state will be that both M1 and M2 should be satisfied at the same time. Wait a second. Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether it's A or B. So it's like AB that crossed with, actually I should put that at last. So it's just f1 cross f2, like f1 should be satisfied, so m1 should be satisfied at the same time m2 should be satisfied, and then you have cross ab, right? And our delta function will be something like this. So the delta is gonna go from, once again, just sigma cross q to q, but it's gonna behave like this, that suppose your input is I, so you have delta of input I, and then the state is, maybe your state is like q1 and then q2, and it's one of these which we'll just call q3, right? So suppose it was A, the q3 thing was A, then you would just do like delta of, so you just apply it to A. So you initially start over here, by the way, that's the initial state as well. So you just apply the thing to m1 only, so you do delta I q1, which is like delta 1, I think that's how I should say it. And then with, of course, cross whatever state you were in m2, that stays the same. And then this state changes, so now it's like B. I shouldn't say cross, I should really say comma, so it's q2 and then comma B, this tuple, right? And similarly you would do something from B, right? So you would do something like, copy paste this guy. So instead of A you would just have B, and over here you would have A, but there's a big difference. Now this delta function would be applied on the second one, so now you just have q1 being the same, and then you would have delta of I comma q2, whatever state that gonna give us. Yeah, so this delta function will actually like suffice. Yeah, it works. I think it works. Am I missing something? The alphabet is the same, it's just sigma. I got the final state, I got the, oh, what's the initial state? It's just like, let's call this q1 naught, q2 naught. And this is the initial state, by the way, like the first input has to be with A. So our initial state is just this tuple, q1 naught, q2 naught, and then A, right? And then you do some stuff and that's it. So all of the shenanigans that are going to happen on m1 and m2, they happen like on m1, then on m2, then on m1, then on m2, and so on. Yep. And finally both of these should reach the final state, and that's it. That's how you get the language given by the perfect shuffle of A and B. Yep. So for languages, let the shuffle of A and B be, so I get it. The perfect shuffle has okay, wait, no, what's the shuffle though? Fine, so the shuffle of A and B is all strings such that the string is A1, B1, so on, where, okay, once again, it's in A, it's in B, and each A, B, oh, I get it, it's in sigma star. Oof, that's complicated, isn't it? Uh-oh. So the first one was easy, right? 1.41. This is not, because once these are in sigma star, we can't do the alternating thing anymore. Okay, how do I make this happen? I should like take in each of these guys. It has no way of distinguishing whether or not this has to happen on A or on B. So now what do you do? So that the class language is closed under shuffle. Okay, this is complicated, isn't it? Think about it. But wait a second, you just said that these are in sigma star. Whoa. But okay, that's not necessary that it would be concatenation of languages. It doesn't work that way. It's still sort of a shuffle in the end. So now we should be able to figure out somehow. Oh, I get it. I think I get it. NFAs, non-determinism. Yeah, that would work. That would actually work. So what we'll do is like, right, this could somehow make sense. Okay, cool. So we'll, like, instead of knowing which one to try, we'll try both things at the same time. And that's why I'm saying it's supposed to be non-determinism, right? So now our delta will actually go from sigma cross and remove this state. Now it's not necessary anymore. You don't need this. Okay, and so now it's gonna go from sigma cross q to the power set of q. Okay, and the delta function will be something like this. That, okay, let's just not think of this a and other stuff. And suppose you have some input, and suppose you are at some state q1 in a and q2 in p. So like combined, you are in q1 comma q2, that tuple, right? And then you want to sort of like, okay, I should just write this q1 q2, whatever. And then now you want to know what's going to be the next bunch of states. So you do not know whether or not I is an input for m1 or it is for m2. So you try out both things. Like you just say, okay, what if it's for m1? That's one possibility. So you just do delta of I comma q1 comma q2, and that's it. That's that possibility. But at the same time, you also do the other possibility where it's not for m1. So you just have q1 and then you have delta of I comma q2. And why I think this will work is your new machine will call the whole thing as m. So if it somehow reaches the final state, like a final state, an accepted state, that is to say that both m1 and m2 are in their accepted states, then it doesn't matter whether or not it did it the correct way, as long as it did it in the first place, because all you want is the w such that this happens, such that, you know, it can be written as this weird bizarre thing, right? And you actually like get m1 m2 in their respective states. That's it. That's all you really want. So you like try out. So just think of it like this: w is some string, maybe it's something like 110. Suppose the alphabet is 1 and 0, right? Whatever, just like a bunch of whatever this is. Now the question is, how was it constructed? There are so many different choices. Actually, not so many. Suppose the length of the string is k, then there's exactly 2 power k choices on how it was constructed, which is to say that whether or not this character was for m1 or for m2. So that's just it, 2 power k choices, right? And you want to go over all of those 2 power k choices and then say that even if one of those choices are good, like those are actually making sense, go with it. This string is there because it's being constructed at least once, and we just want the set. So that's it, we are done. Wow, so the non-determinism sometimes does come in handy. Okay, next question. Let A be any language. Define the dropout to be the what? Sorry, it's just sort of funny. To the language containing all strings that can be obtained by removing one symbol from the string. So dropping out and a symbol from string A, from string in A. Sorry. Thus, dropout of A is all xz such that xyz is in A. Right. Show that the class of regular languages is closed under the dropout operation. Okay, cool. Y is in sigma. Removing one symbol from a string in A. That's weird. You both approve by picture and a more formal proof by construction as in theorem 1.47. Weird. Think about it. So I'm gonna drop out one character. Sort of like shuffle. No, it's not. It's a language where that happens. X, Y. Come on, think. Such that X, Y, Z is in A and it's sort of similar to this previous question, isn't it? So like XZ, you don't exactly know what part is X, what part is Z. So like if you are thinking what I'm thinking, what we could do is like play out all the different possibilities, right? So you think of it as being, well, you have an A, right? You have the machine M1 which like accepts A. Okay, you have another machine which is just a switch. That's it. It's all its purpose is just to be a switch. It has a state 0 and a state 1. So what I'm thinking is it starts off at 0 and at one point it contributes an extra character in M1, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense. Non-determinism, would that make sense? I guess it has to be non-deterministic at that point. Like, you don't know whether or not that character has to be there or doesn't have to be there, so you try out all the possibilities. So M1 is an NFA which does this, and then this is like just another switch sort of a machine, which is also an NFA, by the way. And then you are thinking that the new machine will be having like whatever your states will just be Q cross 0, 1, right? Okay, how will this play out? That's the thing. So your delta function is basically what you want. Well, you want to try out so like some character, right? Yeah, how does that work? What does some character do essentially? It just makes it move from, well, okay, the whole thing should be in a language, right? Yeah, right. But yeah, y is hidden. We don't actually know what y is. So y could be any valid character, right? So the way it would work is just you make one jump. Like, okay, let's just not think of M1 as being some sort of a DFA. Some sort of an NFA. Let's think of it as being a DFA. Okay, so M1 is a DFA. This is also sort of a DFA, but the whole machine as a whole, that will be an NFA now. Okay, so the way this works is you have some state that you are in M1, and you have a bunch of neighboring states, right? You can go to each of these states. So whenever you will consume this switch, you will jump to a neighboring state regardless of like what's happening. You will just like consume it, sort of, right? Like without consuming any characters, will just jump. So we are saying that the delta where you have an epsilon consumption and state that you are in is like any state q in the machine M1, and then 0, right? I shouldn't write it like this, but yeah, so q is 0, something like that. That will give you some neighboring like thing. So the neighborhood of q, which by the way is a very valid operation. I can certainly do that, okay, because I only have to define this for a finite number of cases. Yeah, so it's like certainly valid for me to write it like this, because neighborhood of q is also finite. I could have written it if I knew what the machine is. So yeah, I'll just like say that write the neighborhood of q in this set, right? And then this crossed with, I should just really write it like as a set, so fine. And then this crossed with so now your switch is done. So now it just like enters 1, and yeah, 1 is like that. It's an accept state. So crossed with 1. Yeah, that looks about right. So that's the delta for epsilon. And otherwise, if it's not consuming epsilon, if it's consuming some character x, which is not epsilon, then q and then 0 or 1, it doesn't really matter. Let's call this something y. right? Doesn't matter, call it like something, a character C and then Q, and then this could be anything, so call it like whatever, call it some alpha, right? And what we'll do is we'll just do delta of C cross C comma Q, right, crossed with whatever alpha was. It doesn't change that. Cool. And that looks cool to me. Yeah. If you are in 0, you have some possibility of going to 1, but otherwise you don't, pretty much. So right, you can always take this jump, and you can take this jump by consuming a character. This makes sense, right? Yeah, I think it does. Okay, so that's how you define a machine that, you know, takes these kind of inputs xz, where x, y, z is in A and y is something in sigma. So yeah, that's it, we're done. Next question. Next is that B and C be languages over sigma equal to 0, 1. Define. Right, this is that question which bothered me before. Okay, so it's all W in B such that for some Y in C, the strings W and Y contain equal number of ones. So yeah, I actually looked at its solution, and it was like quite a bit of time ago. It was 2 hours or something, but I remember some part of it. And what you have to rely on is the fact that although like your, what is it called, your finite automata, they cannot like store values, they cannot count, they are unable to count, they can still compare, right? And you saw that previously, like we can compare whether or not one string is bigger than another string, or if it's equal, or if it's like 3 times some binary number or something like that. We can always compare, although we cannot count. And this once again is a comparison problem. It's not a counting problem per se, right? So we just have to make sure that the number of ones that we encounter are equal. And that's pretty much it, right? Show that the class of regular languages is closed with an operation. Okay. So it's all W in B for some Y, such that for some Y in C, strings W and Y contain equal number of ones. So for some Y in C, that's weird. Some Y in C contain equal number of ones. Right, once again, it's a big problem in the end. So you want to try out all the different Y possibilities just like that as well. Yeah. So W has to be in B. Parallelly, you are also running this machine C, which takes in a Y, and then Y also has to make it go to final state. But at the same time, Y should also have just an equal number of ones as W, right? So the main question is, how do you generate Y's? Like, you have to try out all the possibilities, right? Oh no, you actually only have to try out 0 and 1. Huh, that was weird. So you could do it like that, that every time you encounter a 1 in the input, which is by the way W, right, I mean, that's what the language is like containing, all the inputs basically. So for an input in, for the machine, which is by the way also something that is in B, right, what you will do is you will store 1, like, okay, so suppose you encounter a 1 in your W, you halt the execution of B, right, and then you try out all different sorts of, this isn't making sense, right? Right, still go on. So still you try out all sorts of possibilities for Y till that point where you encounter another 1 in Y. So a 1 in Y reverses that halting, like it halts the execution of C, but it continues the execution of B, right? So whichever one of B or C had the last one, that's the one which is halted, and the other is still running. It like gets a bunch of zeros, then it gets a 1 and then it stops, and then the other machine like gets a bunch of zeros and then it gets a 1 and then stops, something like that, right? And then how many zeros does C get? You don't know. That's the thing, we are using NFAs now. So we do not know, we'll just try out everything. Right? So there's like two possibilities. First is you give it a 0 and you continue the thing, like you keep the switch on sort of for C, and then once you decide that maybe it's time to give it a 1, that's when you turn off the switch. So our machine will basically consist of 3 parts. You have the machine B, I should not call it B, let's call it M1. You have the machine M2, which recognizes C language. Oof, not the C programming, like whatever. And then you have a final machine which is like a switch. So it's like it only has 2 states, 1 and 2. Okay, so if it's in state 1, that is to say that 1 is halted, 1 is running, and if that's like the same stuff anyway. And then if it's in state 2, it's like M2 is running, as in M2 accepts inputs. So your delta function is something like this. So your delta of, so you have some state Q1, first of all you need an alphabet, so an input, then Q1, Q2, and then suppose it's 1, then what will essentially happen is like your 1 will accept it, so you just have delta 1 of I Q1. So that's the possibility. Am I doing it correctly or not? Okay, think about it. Yeah, right. Wait a second. If I is 1, then that's to say we have to stop and we have to like reverse it. So if I is 1, then you have to make it 2. And if I is 0, you have to make it 1. This is all messed up. So it should be I plus 1, I guess. So it's this thing but cross I plus 1 sort of. This set, just write it as a tuple. Actually no, this is an NFA we are talking about, so don't write this. Actually no, wait a second. The thing is, both of these are actually DFAs, but the whole machine will be an NFA. So this and then I plus 1, cool, and that's in a set, of course. Like you should probably do this thing and then put it in a set, but whatever. Yeah, this seems about right. So M1 just accepts like a character, and if it's if it's a 0, then it just so happens that nothing really happens, like your state is still 1, but if it's a 1, your state switches to 2, and when it switches to 2, you have to use a different sort of a thing. So now it's like delta I Q1 Q2 and then 2 basically, right? If it's state 2, what do? Well, now there are a bunch of possibilities. Either you could like just keep on getting zeros, which is once again just like you just say delta 1 I, so not delta 1, it's supposed to be delta 2. Oof. So I guess I'm missing something, right? Yes, I am missing a bunch of things. This should also be having a Q2 state. So you progress with machine 1, but you keep the machine 2 as it is, and then you do I plus 1, and this whole tuple and the set of that. That's what this delta will be. Okay, what about this one? So the first tuple, it will be containing 2 tuples basically. The first is, so once again you just have Q1 over there. Okay, the first is when you and in actually both of these cases you will be doing delta 2 of I comma Q2, like you have to progress, doesn't matter what you do. Now if I is 0, you don't have any issue with that, so you keep it at 2, so just do I plus 2. Yeah, right. And if it's a 1, then you do have an issue. So I plus 2 is 3, but that like Oof, it's complicated, isn't it? But 3 is like back to 1 sort of, if it makes sense to you. It's some sort of taking like a modulo operation, if that makes sense. Why is this so complicated? You know what, let's do it like this. Let's call this 0 and call this 1. That's better. It's much better. So if it's at 0, then you do this stuff. And this is q0, q1. This is q0, 0, 1. It's not I plus 1 anymore, it's just I. If it's a 0, it stays at 0. Yeah, that's better. If it's a 1, it switches over to 1. Similarly with this guy, I just have I, q1, it's q0, q1. Now if it just happens that this thing is a 1, you don't want to be doing anything, you just want it to stay where it is, right? So just do I, sorry, wait, what is it doing? Right. You have the input q0, yes, so if it's 1, that is to say that it's in the second machine m1, right? Then once again the input decides it. So if I is 0, you don't do anything, right? And if I is 1, you definitely do something. So that's to say it's going to be 1 plus I, right? It makes sense, and the set is not over here. So this is the tuple, the first tuple, and the other tuple would just be q2 comma delta 2. Sorry, it's q0 and this is q1. What am I doing? q0 delta 1 of I comma q1, right? And wow, what is it doing? Okay. Yeah, the input, right? Oof. Wait a second, we're thinking of y while we are running m1, so you should not at all consume an input. It should just be an epsilon. Makes sense. That's how it should be. Yep. And so this should just be 0 or 1. Yeah, you don't need all of this. So it's either 0 or 1 over there. So if it's a 0, well, you don't do anything, so it just stays to 1. If it's a 1, bad, it goes back to 0. That's how it's gonna be. Cool, finally this makes sense. Yeah. Oh, right. So this is the NFA that I want to construct. What's the final state of this thing? Well, yeah, both m0 and m1 should basically be like, you know, what was I going to call it? Yeah, both of these should be in their final states. That's the condition. And then over here, what's the final state in the 0 and 1 thing? Does it actually matter? No, it doesn't, right? It doesn't quite matter what. But initially it's at 0, right? Yeah. And that is to say the first 1 will be encountered by m0. Okay. So you know it has to make an even number of switches. Like first you do m0, that's 1, then m1 encounters a 1, it should go back to m1, and this should happen like for every 1 encountered in m0's input. So it should finally go back to the final state 0. If it doesn't, well, then that's to say that m0 got an input 1, like got an input which has an extra 1 than y, basically, and so that y doesn't work, so you would not take that. So it should be in 0 state. That's the final state for the third machine. So your final state is basically just f1 cross f2 and cross this set of just a 0 set. There's a 0 in there. That's our final state. Yeah. What's the initial state? The initial state of this cross initial state of that cross initial state of, once again, this guy. So it is like z0. Okay. And what's the alphabet? Is the same, of course. In delta function we got it. So that's it. That's like the whole thing, I guess. Cool. Next question. So these are like closed. Fine. So this is actually a regular language. Next. So A, this slash thing B is all W such that WX is in A for some X in B. So basically you have a string in A, you chop off some string but that was in B, and now the whole string that you have, the remaining part of that, that's what you get. And so the set containing all such remaining parts is A slash B. Oh, that's like quite literally B slashing away from A or something. Fine. Show that if A is regular and B is any language, then A by B is regular. Any language. Wow. That's just sincerely weird, isn't it? A is regular and for some X in B. Wait, you didn't. So B is not necessarily regular. So you don't have a DFA for B. Okay. Oh god. This is not looking good, isn't it? You have to show that A by B is regular. What? No, it doesn't make sense to me. Wow, how do I even start making sense of it? Why is this even making sense? Like, should it not be something like B is also regular or something? I mean, I can't draw a DFA without. So if I can't draw the DFA of B, it's going to be complicated, isn't it? For some X in B, right? So I already have a whole construction of how this would work if we had the DFA for B. If we had a machine that actually accepts B. I suppose when they say it's any language, they are saying like it's any Turing language, like something like that. You know, there's some more complex model which accepts B, but then you don't really care or something like that. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. Anyway, suppose there was a machine and we don't know what kind of machine this is. This could be a finite automata, this could be maybe a push down automata, or anything really. And you just have some machine that, you know, takes in B, like some input for B. And then you have an M1 machine which takes in inputs with A. So what we want to do is basically like, you provide these inputs, like, yeah, and these two run parallelly, but the only catch is B only starts running after a certain point, and then it doesn't like stop running in the mean, right? So you need a switch basically. So the first time it starts running, your switch is just like, it just goes from 0 to 1, right? Yeah. So you can always sort of like insert this move, this epsilon move, where you do not consume any character in the input string, but your switch is suddenly just opened. And what's going to happen is like B now starts accepting characters, right? So now it's something like delta, you have some input, you have some state q1, q2 for this whole thing, and then let's just call this like 0 and 1, so for off and on. So if it's off, and you initially start off at off state, then this is, by the way, completely an NFA that we are constructing. So there's going to be two tuples. First is like, okay, you might just apply it to M1. So just have delta of I q1. These are not NFAs now. this is a DFA for M1, it's a regular language. Then you have the same state for Q2, it doesn't really change. And by state, I don't really know what a state is in this setting anymore, because you do not know whether or not M2 is a finite automata, but let's just run along with it. Okay, so you have some Q2, I mean the same Q2 as before, and so first case was where you just did something on M1, right? So the switch is still off, cool. In the second state, what you did is that you opened the switch. Wait, no, this doesn't make sense. You don't want to be opening a switch, because in this particular case you're consuming a character, so it would not make sense to be opening a switch. Or it would make sense, I don't know, you could do it. I guess I'll do it actually. So it's delta of IQ1 once again. I mean, once again you're actually running it on M1, cool. But at the same time, now you're not keeping it to 0, now it's like 1, cool. And what happens if it, instead of 0, it was 1 over there? Well, then this switch is always just open, but it runs on both of these. So it's delta of I comma q1, and then it's delta of I comma q2, or whatever you mean by the state in this case, and then this is still 1. It will never go back to 0. Cool. Yeah, this looks about right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Makes sense. There should probably be another loop over there. And this is correct. Fine. Next question. And thus you have constructed A/B to be a regular language, because you have actually, is it a regular language? It only makes sense for it to be regular if B is also some finite automata. Like, only then can you define it like this, but I don't know, I'll just run along with it. Why should it be that B is any language? Such that this happens. For some X and B. Oh, come on. All W such that this WX is in A. Wait, you only want the... Oh shit. Oh no, I just messed up the whole thing. I basically did like all WX in A such that X is in B. I should have done all W in A's. Oh god, no. This is bad. Yeah, this is really, really bad. For some X in B. Oof. Yeah, this should not be the case. Okay, let's just rethink everything now. So you only are given the W, you're not given the whole WX. Okay, so what happens when you consume W? Well, A reaches somewhere, not necessarily the final state. You still have to have the X, and then B is still at the initial state. Okay, now how do you start putting the X thing in there? Yeah, I have no idea, but just think about it. Like, what are the all states which are possible? It's the neighborhood of the state in A and the neighborhood of state in B cross, and then you have... So let's do it like this. Suppose your string is not ended yet and you have already made the transition to generating the string X. That's a problem, isn't it? So what you'll do is you'll just make sure that next time you consume a character, you just trash the whole string. So this switch will serve for that. So as long as it's 0, it's basically saying that okay, we're just like doing it normally, W is being consumed. But the moment it switches 1, you consume any more characters, you are done. You don't want to continue. Okay, so if it's 0, you basically do this stuff, and it's going to be different now. It's going to be different. So what you do is you just these are, by the way, DFAs, right? No, we don't know if M2 is a DFA or not. Why is this so complicated? Fine, just do it. Just try to do it. So it's the delta of I Q1, yeah, crossed. So this has a set, by the way, now. Yeah. No, it's a set of set at this one. Why is this so complicated? Think about it. Just keep going. Just try to do it. Let's hope we'll get somewhere. Okay, then this crossed with the actual, this is going to be some sort of an NFA, I don't know what is. So I'll just think of it as all the states that this could be in. So delta of I comma Q2, it's delta 1, delta 2, of course. Right, it's in some other state. Now this could be in 0, so you could either have a 0 or a 1, something like that. This looks good so far. Now what if this is, 1? Then this would just be like trashed automatically. You do not want to continue. But if delta epsilon, then it's not trashed. Then you say, okay, we'll just like put any random character. So this will be the whole neighborhood of whatever state Q1 is in. Yeah, because any random character essentially means like you can do anything basically. I guess that makes sense. Or you could always do it like that, right? You could just say it's the union of these sets. So complicated. It's delta 1 I Q1 cross delta 2 I Q2, and then it's always going to be a 1 over there. It will never go back to something else. So it's the union over I, like I in sigma. You take all the different inputs and see if they somehow like match. That is, both the machines run for that input. If it just so happens that none of these sets is phi, then you're good to go. Because if one of these sets is phi, that's kind of problematic, isn't it? Yeah. This looks right. This looks right to me. Okay, next question. Oof, that was weird. Right. Next you have prove that the following languages are not regular. You may use the pumping lemma and the closure of the class of regular languages under union intersection. Just wait a second. Is this true that B can be any language over here? What tells you that? Nothing really. I mean, yeah, for all we know, it could be A bar and B bar and like it will work, right? Yep. X is in A and I don't get it. I don't get it. Why B is any any random language? It doesn't make sense. If it's a DFA, then there's a machine for it, like a proper DFA for it, and then everything starts to make sense. But now it just doesn't. Like there could be a stack over there for all we know, and then it would have a larger class of languages. Would it still be regular in that case? What's the state for such a thing where you have a stack? Well, you know that X is in B, but WX is in A. That's part of a regular language. Yes, but just being a part of a regular language does not mean that A by B is actually a regular language. So unless B is regular, I'm not sure. I'm going to search this. I'm actually going to like see the thing for it. So it's 46, right? They probably have the solutions. Yeah. 46 is let B be 0. What? No, that's not what we were looking for. No. Wait, which question was this? It's problems. Oof. Okay, it's 45. Fine. Let's just search for 45. Where are the solutions? It's 50, 40. There's no 45. Why is there no 45? God. Now, this is just frustrating, isn't it? So 44 is there, 46 is there, 40 is there. There's no 45 for some reason. Fine. As you wish. You don't give me answers. Okay, next is 46. Prove the following languages are not regular. You may use a pumping lemma in the closure of the class of regular languages under union, intersection, and complement. 0 power n, 1 power m, 0 power n. Yeah, it's certainly not regular. I mean, once you start pumping it, things get bad real quick. Right? Yeah. So you actually cannot pump it in the first place. Like you have a bunch of zeros, you have a bunch of ones, this whole thing is 0, this whole thing is 1, and you have a bunch of zeros, right? Where do you pump it? Like what section do you pump? So now if you have all, like if you have something from all three sections and you start pumping that, that's certainly not going to work, because you are essentially like taking this one and then making it like come back over there again and all of that stuff. So that's not working. If you pump just a part of this section, actually that kind of works. If you pump just a part of the ones, then it actually does work, doesn't it? Yeah, it does work apparently. Actually, no, it shouldn't be working. Ah. Hey, wait, so the pumping lemma is like, it's supposed to work for every single string in your language, right? So because this actually contains, no, not sure about it. Section complement. Right, the only thing is like you have 0 power n over there and then again 0 power n. So it's weird. If it was 0 power n, 1 power n, you know how it works. If it's 0 power, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? So it's for any value of m, isn't it? Hey, if it's for any value of m, it's also for m equal to n or something. But once again, you can always like sort of pump the 1 or m section. That shouldn't really cause a problem. If m equal to 0, then it of course makes sense for you to be pumping, right? So it's like 2n, it's all even. Why does it feel like it's actually gonna work? So what's the restriction on this thing? The only restriction is like, actually that's a bunch of restrictions in there. Yeah, so it's not a good idea to be taking a complement of this and that. Okay. Come on, just think. The complement of a regular language is also a regular language. Could you use that somehow? No, this is not going to work. this whole thing with palindromes, that's kind of problematic. How do you prove this? Pumping lemma, closure of the irregular classes under union, intersection and complement. Okay, union, huh? Intersection. Okay, so this intersected with, yeah, okay, that won't work. With another regular language that will also be a regular language. That's essentially what I'm going to say, but I mean, it's pretty obvious that that won't work. It just won't work. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to do this one. But so I'll just keep thinking. Like, you certainly need a stack. You can see from the thing itself that you need a stack to know how many zeros you have. Yeah. You should be able to pump it for like anything, right? So what was the proof of the pumping lemma? Like, how would that happen? It was basically like, you start off at some state, you keep going through different states, right? So it's like Q0, Q1, so on. Eventually, by pigeonhole principle, one of these states should be repeating itself, right? And so if a state repeats itself, that's to say that from this state to this state, whatever you did, that string, that could be repeated. Yeah, that's the whole idea. But then again, you can apply it with this as well, right? So 0 power n, make n absurdly big, like much bigger than the number of states that you have, and you will be able to say that, okay, in the 0 power n section itself, you will in fact encounter the repetition of a state, and if that happens, you can just take those bunch of zeros between those two and then like expand it. So now you just have 0 power n plus x, where x is as large as you want, and 1 power m and then 0 power n, which is of course not in the language anymore, but it should be in the language if it's regular. Oh, so pumping lemma is actually much more powerful because it's like much more restricted. Yeah, so pumping lemma doesn't even say that there is some section in the string. It straight up says there is some section after the number of states plus 1 characters, and there's necessarily some section after the number of states plus 1 characters in the string, such like, yeah, such that you can pump it. It actually makes sense, right? As in, like, you just take the first q plus 1 characters, capital Q plus 1, that is to say, in of the string, and it's guaranteed that somewhere over there you will have a repeated state, and which means like you can take some string from this and just expand it, like just have it multiple times and it will still be okay. So yeah, that works. Pumping lemma kind of disproves A being a regular language. What about B? 0 power m, 1 power n, where m is not equal to n. Okay. M is not equal to n. The complement of this language would be much more complicated. We cannot do that. Okay. The complement of the language, isn't it? I don't know how to do this. But n is not equal to n ever. Hey, but this is like completely stupid, isn't it? Make m and n big enough, and then you will certainly find it's some sort of a Diophantine equation. Like, yeah, you will find a string of, let's just say, length x, and you will find a string of, let's just say, length y, the first being a string of zeros, second being a string of ones, which are such that they like take you back to a state, basically. And then if the GCD of these x and y is 1, we can essentially generate all sorts of difference between m and n, right? Yeah. and so you would in fact be able to get m equal to n. I mean, this happens. So this language contains all m and n such that m is not equal to n. So it also contains ones where, you know, the GCD of m and n also. So what I'm saying is something like this: if there exists for this for whatever machine this is, you're saying it's a regular language, right? So it has some machine, and you're saying, so I'm saying like you do 0 0 0 0 0, eventually it will reach a state which it will be like getting repeated. So state, let's just say q0, it gets repeated, right? And then you have a x length 0 string, like, which is in between these two states. So that's to say you can have like any multiple of x added to m, and then similarly with n, like eventually there will be a point where you will have a repetition, right? So let's just say this is by length of one string in between, so you can have any multiple of y added, right? So the difference between the number of ones and number of zeros, that will be something like my minus, I shouldn't even say this as mn, so it will be something like alpha x minus beta y plus m minus n, of course, right? And we want this to be 0, and that certainly can be achieved because you have all kinds of m and n values. So it's the only restriction is like m is not equal to n, so m minus n could be anything for all you know, right? And so for at least one of these things, it would also be x minus y or y minus x or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much the thing. You just have to find some certain m and n values such that this happens. Hey, that was easy. That was pretty easy. Like, consider the case where you have n equal to m plus x. You know what to do, right? This is like m, this is m plus x, and you know you have a string of x which you can repeat. So repeat it, and you will have m equal to n basically. And so that's not in the language anymore. So it's like you pumped it, it's not in the language. That's to say this is not a regular language in the first place. And this will happen, I guarantee it. Okay. Next you have all w such that w is in 0 1 star, and it's not a palindrome. So w is basically any string. That's all you're saying of 0 1, and it's not a palindrome. So the complement of this thing is, oh, why is this like power 8 over there? Also 8 such strings basically. Huh? It's not a palindrome. That's all you're saying. Wait, is that actually the case? It's a power 8 over there, isn't it? I guess, yeah. So it's like concatenated with itself 8 times. Okay. So fine, I guess. W being a palindrome, huh? That by itself is not a regular language. The language of all palindromes is necessarily it's a context-free language, right? It requires a stack. How do you prove that? With pumping lemma, of course. Yeah, because the language of all palindromes, like, if this is the middle section of your string, you can always have a very big string, and then you just have this part like in the first cube plus 1 characters, where you would have some repetition, and then you can just pump this thing, but you can make it like bloated, you can make it very large, so then this does not ever match with this, so it's not a palindrome anymore. You can certainly do that, right? It's not possible for it to be palindrome all the time, or is it? You will have one such string at least. You will certainly have one such string. Yeah. Consider this string 0 0 0 0 0. So it's like, oh, consider just 0 power m, 1 power n, and 0 power m once again. That's a palindrome. So yeah, what was I going to say? So as m gets like very big, you can pump it, and then it's like not in the language anymore. So that's to say this is not a regular language. So the language of and you can like do it because it's you know, so it's not, it won't be a palindrome of course, but this is of course a subset of the language of palindrome, so child is called P. So this can be pumped to give something that is not a palindrome, right? And that basically means that P is not regular. But if P is not regular, the complement of P is also not regular, and the complement of P is exactly this language W, such that W is not a palindrome basically, right? Yeah. So you have a language which is not regular, and that language concatenated with itself 8 times, and would that be regular? I don't think so. Yeah, I certainly just don't think so. Concatenate 8 times. One thing is like the epsilon string is it a palindrome? Is the epsilon string a palindrome? I suppose it is, right? Oh, is it? I do not know. I don't think it is. Let's just say it is also a palindrome. And so is a singleton. That's also sort of a palindrome because it's like symmetric. Yeah. So what we'll say is, just think of the simplest sort of a palindrome. Just think of AB, right? So in the it's kind of weird. I don't know. I actually do not know how this would be the case. Yeah, this power 8, that's weird. How do I deal with this? I don't know, let's just leave it for now. Let's go to D. So it's WTW such that W and T are in 0 and 1 star. Oh, 0, 1 plus. So it's at least three like characters, and you have like W being the same sort of thing. Yeah. Once again, you require a stack for this most likely. Heck, not just a stack, you actually require much more for it. You require a whole tape for this actually. Yeah, right. So this is like clearly not a palindrome. Sorry, this is clearly not a regular language. You can see it, right? Yeah. I think so. I think it can never be something like that. What about it? Popping lemma. Something like W and then just like make it go. Okay. Okay, it's bad. It's bad over here. WTW. You would not be able to write it like that in any circumstance. This must end in no, it doesn't make. I don't know. This could actually be a regular language because the only restriction is that from the first and from the last, you actually like you have something which is the same. That's all it's saying really. It's like saying that some string repeats itself. That's all you're saying, right? But it's all such characters, isn't it? But wait a second. Okay, so you do have some sort of a overcounting thing going on, but like the only restriction is you only have such strings which can be broken into 3 sections, W, T and W, such that the first W, like let's just say like first 2 characters and the last 2 characters, these 2 strings are the same. Sure. That's pretty much the only thing. And they have to be exactly the same. Yeah. Why is this weird? Okay, let's consider. No, that won't work. Oof. Come on. Think. Something that is in there. Why is it getting so complicated? Okay, let's make this example. This might work, who knows. So suppose you have a string like this, 1 0. Yeah, so you have a bunch of zeros, like 0 power n, I don't know, and then you have a bunch of zeros again, right? And just so that t isn't like gone, this extra 0, that's for t. Okay, so what I'm saying is, you know how the pumping lemma works, right? So it's like, is this language 1 0 power n, you have an extra 0, and then 1, and then 0 power n again for all n. You know that this is w, this t, this w, so this is a part. In fact, all such strings with any n value, those are a part of your language. Now for a big enough n, what you can do is that you can pump this part, right? And because you can pump this part, what you can do is you can just make it so big, like just make it like 100 times of n or something. Essentially make it such that it's never possible for you to even have w tw ever again, right? Because so the first w of course contains a 1, so the last w should also contain a 1 and equal number of zeros. But if it has to contain the 1, it would have to contain 100n, right? So actually just make it anything that's like, that's just bigger than that. So like you're done. This is n plus 1, by the way, this is extra 1. Right, so if it has to contain that 1, the last w, then it also has to contain all the n plus x zeros. But that means it can never be the same as the first w, because first w can only have at maximum n plus 1 zeros. So that's it. We just proved by one counter example that this is not a palindrome. Sorry, that this is not a regular language. So this was weird. Next question. Okay, I see. I think I get it. You have some generalized case of a language. You take a small example out of it, a small special case. Then you say that for a large enough n value, and then you pump it, and then you say, oh well, it can never be that it's of this form again. And that's how the pumping lemma works. Okay, next 47, let sigma be this thing, and let y be this. Prove that y is not regular. Fine. So y is all w such that w is equal to x1 hash x2 hash so on till xk for k bigger than or equal to 0, each xi belonging to 1 star. So what? 1 star, so it's just some number of ones, then hash, then some number of ones, and hash, and so on. And xi is not equal to xj for I is not equal to j. I didn't get what this said. Oh, so x1 and x2 can never be the same. That's what you're saying, right? These are all different. Okay, I get it. Prove that y is not regular. So suppose you have capital Q number of states for this, and if it's like a regular, then you only have to consider the string which has an x sub l such that the length of x sub l is like bigger than q. That's it. You just have to wait until you get a state like that, and well, that is going to be there because your w is just of this format. So for all we could know, x1 hash xl, that's like a valid w for this, right? Because it's all such w that can be written like that. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So if you ever encounter an x sub l like that, you know what to do. You just say that because it's bigger than q, there will be a repetition of state at some point. I should just say like q plus 2 or something, q plus 1, something like that. But well, yeah, so for large enough xl, you will have a repetition, and when you have a repetition, you know, you can just like bump it up or something. Oh, by the way, you will also have, you know, how do I say this? Suppose the repetition is like of length x. I mean, the string between the repetitions is of length. I shouldn't say x. Is of length y, right? That's better. Is of length y. Then what you can do is just like you can say that 1 power y. You add it to that. That's also, you know, a valid thing now. This is so weird. Right, and let's just say this is like x sub l plus come on, x sub l plus y already. So this was like that. You had x1 x. So consider a string x1 hash x2 such that the length of x1 is equal to l, the length of x2 is equal to l plus y, and where y is the minimum pumping length sort of for just the string of 1. I guess that makes sense. So and L is like any arbitrarily large value, and we'll say that L is like necessarily bigger than q plus 1. If that happens, and this does happen, this language does contain a string like that, then you can just pump x1. You can pump x1 for it to become x2. You just have x2 hash x2, which is like bullshit. I mean, come on, you just said that x1 x2 should not be equal, but now they are equal for different values. Wow. So y is not regular because it contains something which it does not contain, so it doesn't make sense. Next question. Let sigma be equal to this and d be equal to all w such that w contains an equal number of occurrences of the substrings 0 1 and 1 0. Thus 1 0 1 is in d because 1 0 1 contains a single whatever. I guess this is getting boring at this point, right? But yeah, there's some good stuff like this which I guess is important. I'll just do the A marked ones, right? So 1.50. Read the informal definition of the finite set transducer. Okay, prove that no FST can output W reverse for every input W if the input and output alphabets are 0 1. Okay. Output reverse. Oh yeah, okay, it's that. Fine. So FST was introduced before, you know, in the exercises part. So it's basically like the it's gonna be hard to like tell about all of this right now. Okay, I guess I'll take a break. See you guys next video. Bye. I'm just gonna give you a brief idea of what an FST is. So finite state transducer is basically just another finite automaton, just say it's a DFA basically, such that every arrow, instead of having just like one character, which is the input character required for that transition to happen, you have two things. So you would have something like 0, 1, 0/1, whereby which you mean by this you mean like you input 0 but you output 1, and all of these outputs concatenated in that order, that gives you the final output. So you take in the input, you get an output, and that's what the transducer does. It transduces your input to something else, to an output basically. And it's sort of like a DFA. It has to end in the final state. It has the same kind of transition function, except it has this extra stuff going on, like it gives this extra character, and that's pretty much it. That's the FST, and we want to prove that no FST can reverse a string for every string. Yeah, if the input and output are and output alphabets are 0 1, right? So basically just have every string in 0 1 star, can you reverse it with an FST? And the answer to that is no. We have to prove that it's no. Wow, it's kind of complicated, isn't it? Oof. Yeah, this will be weird. If it can reverse a string, then that's to say that it can travel backwards, sort of. But that certainly cannot happen. I mean, by the very nature of this thing, it makes sense that it cannot reverse a string, but fine. We'll probably search for a good proof for this, and then I'll meet you. So, see you guys in the next video. Bye.